the Good Shepherd.
Let's rescue the one lost sheep. The lost sheep just doesn't want to go to the right place. Lost sheep, finally back with the other sheep. Let's have a look at your chickens.
There's 8 of them, so the rest are all hopefully sitting there making eggs.
Well, hello everyone, I'm here with my brother, Sir Philip. Yeah, so Philip Needham, and we're going to reminisce about our childhood and particularly ask Philip about his journey with God. He had a bit of a spiritual awakening, which kind of convicted me that I need a bit more spiritual awakening. So,
Yeah.
Where shall we begin?
We could probably, since we're standing in a paddock on a farm, we could talk about our life growing up in Ararua on the dairy farm. I always loved our life on the farm, so here I am on my small scale version of it, just south of Auckland and Hunua. And yeah, when I had kids, I decided I'd like my kids to grow up rural, go to a small country school, kind of the way you and I did. And yeah, we'll go saying this morning that life at home on the farm was a good life. But yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, as a little kid I always had quite a strong sort of sense of right and wrong. You know, for me personally, not necessarily what others were doing, but I always felt strongly convicted if I ever did anything that wasn't right. And yeah, growing up in a Christian family and going along to church, Sunday school, Bibling in schools, having a really good exposure to the Christian way of life and God. Yeah, I always, even from a really young age, had quite a strong sense of needing to do what was right. I remember as a little kid being told to go back to bed because at night time I'd often lie there in bed not being able to fall asleep because I was pondering all the deep things of life, what it meant to fall out of favour with God and perhaps not go to heaven. All these little things that, or maybe they're not so common for little kids to worry about, but they seem to be for me anyway. And then that sort of led me to sort of, I don't know, because mum and dad would sort of sit beside me saying, go back to sleep, and would pray and say, you know, just ask God for his peace, you know, ask God for that he would, yeah, comfort you. And as a little kid, and I don't know what age I would have been, pretty young, even like sort of 5 years old, praying that God would fill me with his peace. And I remember often it would happen. I would feel very full of peace and comforted, fall to sleep and get into my normal little kid day the next day. And yeah, so we had a cousin Peter, who also had quite a sort of strong, I guess you'd say, revelation of God, and he came stayed one summer. Often our cousins would come stay on the farm over the summer, and yeah, I had this kind of quite a good summer with Peter. We were talking a lot, and he'd sort of introduced me to sort of concepts that I hadn't previously engaged in, like walking around praying out loud to God. Like, as a little kid, that was sort of a newer step, so to speak. And next thing, yeah, Peter and I are walking around the farm, and and it sort of turned into sort of, in some ways, you know, worshipping God, thanking God for everything. And I remember one time just being just so over, sort of come with a sense of gratitude and yeah, gratitude's probably the best way of putting it. Joy, and feeling that yeah, this is a very kind of real thing to be connected to God. And I don't know exactly the order of it all, but sometime not so long after that, we went to some kind of a youth conference. I think it was in Auckland, because we had to travel down. You know, I remember an altar call that happened, and being convicted to go up and, you know, publicly declare my faith. So I did so, and from that I was, yeah, quite motivated to continue pushing into God. And it was roughly around my 12th birthday at Chambers in the Esparp Hall. After a church service on Sunday, I was baptised, and yeah, a little bit after that we left Arua and we moved to Whangarei, moved from the country life to what was to us the big city life, and that came with all its crazy learnings about, I don't know, the so-called real world, I guess, with all its challenges. Being a funny little country kid that had quite a different way of living his life compared to what his peers from the city did. Went to Whangarei Boys High. That was pretty challenging time. I mean, it was in reflection a good school, and it was good. Had all its faults like any normal school would, but it was the culture shock for me, moving from a very sort of sheltered, small scale country life, heavily in that Christian family, into just a very, what for me was a big, like Arua Primary School was what, 26 students or something like that when I left, into Whangarei Boys, which was probably more like 900, I think it was a bit under 1,000 students then. And so yeah, man, anything and everything was on go, but I basically held true to my convictions the whole way through schooling. That was yeah, and then I've never really engaged too much on the social front. All my friends generally still were good mates that I had outside and from church circles. So when I look back across my whole of my youth, I'm very fortunate that I just had good friendships. Good friendships are important. Yeah, and then so we were going to the AOG church up in Whangarei at that time, and I got involved in the youth group scene, obviously first as a young person, and then yeah, I was always someone to not shy away from taking on a bit of responsibility. So when the youth leaders of the time would say, "Phil, would you like to help us out a little bit more by turning up a bit earlier and helping to coordinate running some of the events and things we were doing?" I would always say, "Yeah, sure." And then that led to, "Well, Phil, would you like to take on a Sunday, or not Sunday, more on like a Wednesday night Bible study?" And sure, yeah, why not? And by that stage I'd grown up, left school, and I'd started working. I was doing an apprenticeship in small engines. I was working in a lawnmower and chainsaw shop of all places, which strangely has actually continued on to be the rest of my career in the outdoor power equipment industry. But yeah, so I was left school and I was doing a trade and had time to take on doing a bit of this youth group leadership stuff and running little Wednesday night Bible studies, but I quickly realised I didn't actually know that much about the Bible because I've never been super into studying. It's not been a strong point of mine, so I decided that I needed to, commit to learning a bit more, and I went to Lifeway Bible College for, first off was a 6-month, turned into, I think all up I did a year of sort of full-time study with Lifeway. And that was a very interesting time. I went along with all these preconceived ideas of what I'd get out of it, I guess. Growing up, particularly in the Whangarei times, in the AOG church, and I guess a church that had that quite strong Pentecostal revival culture in the church. It was there were lots of things about what seemed like normal church life and how people behaved in our church that I thought, I haven't come to know God in that way, in this way that I could launch out speaking in tongues or cast demons out of people, or these quite dramatic things that would seem to be somewhat normal or commonly seen things, or there was a strong emphasis on those really visible spiritual acts, in that church, as was sort of common really with a lot of the Pentecostal style churches. So yeah, I was really thought I'd go in and experience God the way I thought that I would, and I went. Long story short, I went through the Lifeway scene. It was good, but but God didn't present Himself to me, I guess, in the way I thought. And I think what was put before me, and for the rest of my adult life, was to really push in to, seek God in my own unique way, because we're all unique people, and to try and I don't know. I haven't given much thought to that. You might have to cut this bit and let me think about it for a second.
No problem. I can edit.
Yeah, getting married and becoming a father, and it's kind of, the still small voice, where is it Elijah that is, there's talks about, was God in the fire, was God in the earthquakes, but no, it was in that still small voice that seems to be the stage of life that I feel like I'm at the moment, is that you keep looking for those big dramatic representations of God, but you have to find that actually the reality of God in your life is very much deep in you, and you have to pay a lot of attention to that and be true to it. So that's kind of where I feel I'm at with my journey in God at the moment. Yeah, but that's, a journey, and it's still ongoing, and I guess part of talking with my brother Matt today is not to go so much deeper into that part, but also just to reminisce about those times of life back in our childhood. We're both a little bit greyer than we were back on the farm.
Can't stop the aging process. Well, I was just going to say, just going back to when you were talking about your, what I call it, a spiritual awakening, which led to you getting water baptized when you were 12 years old. And at that Christian meeting, the concert in Auckland, where I saw you going forward, I was standing right behind you.
Can you remember what that?
Yep, it was Twice Pardoned.
That's right.
That was the movie.
That's right.
Which was about a man who got saved in prison and then had an awesome youth ministry.
Yeah.
And when I saw Phil going forward to give his life to Jesus, make a public confession, I kind of felt like going forward myself, but for some reason I didn't. And then after that I regretted it. And then Phil got serious that he wanted to get water baptized, and Peter, our cousin, had got water baptized, and Phil wanted to get water baptized on his 12th birthday, which happened. And I remember on that day being so happy for my brother. I had a big smile on my face. I was so happy in my heart. Here's my younger brother getting water baptized. And then I felt so convicted, because here I'm the oldest in the family out of the children, and I haven't been water baptized. And here's my younger brother getting more serious for God than me. So it actually really convicted me, and it did lead to my own spiritual awakening a few months later. So I have to say thank you to Phil, first of all, that his witness for God as a child really touched my life.
Yeah, it's interesting, if you just stay true to your convictions and you're not even intentionally targeting to be anything like that. It's interesting how you can be impactful. I remember sort of after that period, and it's sort of after you had your revelation to really commit deeper into God. At that time you were staying in the caravan outside. We'd shifted to property in Manu, Auckland, Whangarei, and you and I would sit in the caravan. I remember just being amazed how quickly you sort of really delved into the scripture, learnt what the scriptures were really meaning, because I would talk with you about all sorts of ideas as we were talking about God together, and you could, Phil, I don't think the scripture was really meaning that. I think it was meaning, and I'd be like, oh yeah, true, okay. And I think even that in itself, the way you embraced studying the Bible was one of the drivers for me to realise that, when I was trying to do a bit with youth leadership, that I needed to be a bit more like my brother and go and study so that I could actually give a clearer and more accurate account for what it is that I believe. And so yeah, you were also impactful on me in those times too, very much.
Yeah, I remember one time when we had a prayer meeting together in the house, the little house there in Manu, and we were jumping around in the worshipping God. So it was quite fun days. It was when you first get sort of like spiritually awakened to God and you got that first love for Jesus. It's quite wonderful. So we were blessed that we had good parents who brought us up in the ways of God. So very thankful for our family. Still puffing after taking your sheep down? But yeah, we were thinking it's just good to talk about Mum and Dad.
Our mummy. Yeah. Yeah, well, we were saying before how despite any of the normal sort of challenges that anyone can face as a kid growing up in this world, we just had such an incredible home environment to grow up in. My mum and dad, well, for one, they loved us, they were good to us, they cared for us, housed and fed and comforted us, and they did their best to teach us about what they knew was right and wrong and real in the world, about God, and it was pretty awesome. I was going to say, there's a thought that I keep often in these recent times, what with Mum being struck down with Alzheimer's, but I remember a good few years back now at a church service, and someone prophesied over Mum and said, deep calls to deep. And I remember, because Mum was talking about it on and off for a few years after, because in her journey she had a path to walk a little bit in those days, and I remember her sort of trying to wrap her head around what that meant, deep calls to deep, for her life, you know. And I also remember thinking, what does that mean? And none of us knew the challenges that lay before her. And yeah, I guess in reflection now, watching your mother go through the challenges and the hardship, it's been, I don't know, something about that has really spoken to me. Not that I understand it. How do you get your head around watching someone that's been so faithful and so committed as a mother, as a believer, as just a beautiful lady, and go through the hard times that she's had. But it's at the same time, there's been, I guess, some degree of comfort knowing that I guess God knew the path that was still ahead for her, and He knew that He was calling her into something very deep. But there was something deep within her that was calling to that deep, because God had built something very real in her life. And who are we to question the challenges and the journey that lay before any of us? But it's comforting to know that God He is in it with us and walks the deep with us. It's a very deep statement to be talking about, but it's something that's stuck with me. When I think about Mum, it just keeps coming to me all the time. That prophecy she had, deep calls to deep. And for you, Matt, what's the thing that strikes you most in your...
Well, when I'm just thinking about Mum, because my journey was called to be an evangelist and a missionary, so I would shoot off to different parts of the country and then shoot off to different countries around the world. And then when I would come home from the mission field, I'd sort of always share my adventures and stories with Mum, and she would always be the listening ear. She'd be the one that I would, in some ways, unburden myself. So my best memories of Mum are just being a person of wisdom, being a person who could talk to, and she would stand with you. And so I'm so thankful for my parents, and thinking of my mum, how she is now, but that God is still in control and God will reward my mum. She's a beautiful woman of God.
I think one of the amazing things to observe now, despite Mum's difficult situation, is to observe our dad, the Fred. I mean, if you ever wanted an example of what it meant to be faithful, devoted, he's a beacon of that. Faithful and devoted to Mum, but his faith in that God is in all of this is unwavering. It's amazing. Because it's been challenging for me. There's not going to lie about that. Trying to see where God is in all this, and what's the point of all of this, you know, when you see someone go through that. But Dad, he's just been unwavering, steadfast in his commitment to God and to Mum. So that's been a huge blessing to us, to have that role model in our lives too, for sure.
So thank you everyone for listening to these awesome testimonies. Thank you for my brother, also sharing a bit of his life journey with God.
How was it?
Hi. Hello.
Come on in.
What was the name of the place that you guys grew up?
Ararua. Ararua means Ara is a...
What are you doing?
I'm playing a game. Same as me.
Cool.
In the same game, yeah.
Hello.
She's playing a game.
All playing games.
So maybe
Yeah.
the same one, just when you're actually there.
The cousins.
Cousins.
Yeah, we'll go do that.
It won't add
I'm gonna
dramatic
play a different game
time to the
from
journey.
here.
It's still heading
I'm gonna
the
play
right
a different game.